a very special acknowledgement of country this week, because this event is being held during NAIDOC week. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands on which we are meeting today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Here at the incubator, we are really proud to be on the Watamatagal clan land, and we are also really proud to connect with a lot of the elders of this land and invite them in to our incubator to facilitate programming and conversation. We think this is a really important matter. So this event, as I said, falls within NAIDOC week, and the theme of this year's NAIDOC week, as you see there, is Heal Country, and it's all about embracing that cultural knowledge, that rich history, that connection to the land that our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander traditional custodians have. And we'll share the official NAIDOC website, but there's a lot of ways that you can get involved in NAIDOC week. Sadly, in Sydney, some of these events have had to be cancelled or moved online, but nonetheless, they're still going ahead, and it's a very important cause. So I'm Ainsley Harvey, and I am the incubator manager. This is our beautiful incubator building right there. I am actually in the office today. I obtained special permission to be here because my internet is often quite patchy at home. So yes, here I am. I'm sitting in the beautiful incubator. It's full of light. It's full of inspiration. It's full of startup founders working on their ideas. And we are just, it's an asset for Macquarie University, and we'll tell you more about that at the end. So I think that's the end of my presentation. I'll just stop sharing there so I can see all your faces. There you are. We're really excited to be bringing you this event today in collaboration with Macquarie University alumni team. So Lex Pedersen, who's on screen now, who I'll introduce shortly, is one of Macquarie's star alumni, having graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in 1999. Sounds a little while ago now, Lex, but we won't dwell on that. Lex went on to become the co-founder of the well-known brand SurfStitch, which I'm sure that you're all familiar with. And since then, he has done a number of things, but he's now the director and portfolio manager of his newest company, Chrome Temple. So, hi, Lex.
Hey, guys. Ainsley, thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Lex. We've got a good crowd, and I guess I'll jump straight into it because they're obviously here for a reason. And that reason is to get to know more about you and your journey. And we are all, as humans, interested in someone's journey. So I want to go kind of way back to the start of, when you're in your university days. After graduating from the Bachelor of Arts in 1999, where did you find yourself? What did you think that you'd be doing?
Yeah, well, you're right. When I read 1999, I was like, it sounds, that was a space for a horror movie, wasn't it? Long time ago. It doesn't feel that long ago. But since then, I've enjoyed a wild, fast and fun journey, a roller coaster of sorts. I found myself in 99, to answer your question, working in a surf shop. I had my own landscape maintenance business, and I decided that I would travel Australia in a modest little motorhome to commence that entrepreneurial journey and to dream up, to conjure up some kind of invention that I thought would see me through my days. And not long after taking that Bachelor of Arts in hand, I found myself in deep Northern Territory, sitting around a campfire, literally in the middle of nowhere, and a large motorhome turned up, and we ended up sitting around a fire with this gentleman and his wife, enjoying a story. And he asked me what I was doing out there. I told him I was searching for my entrepreneurial blueprint, I suppose. And I quizzed him on how he was fortunate enough to have a Taj Mahal on wheels And something that stuck with me, I suppose, a lot was then he proceeded to tell me his career highlights and how his last business he sold for some kind of telephone kind of number in the tens of millions was selling fly screens. So anyway, the moral of the story was, and how that became a pivotal point was, similar to the Nike "Just Do It." His philosophy was just do it better. Don't reinvent the wheel. Identify something where there's an opportunity, and just simply do it better than the rest. So that really stuck with me, and I returned to my surf shop roots, where I'd started to build the pocket money to afford a trip like that. And I suppose that's where the journey for myself, built around passions, really started. So that experience and the Bachelor of Arts you mentioned, that what was so invaluable about that was broadening my perspective and my communication skills and the discipline and commitment required to build your own business, as I did some years later.
Yeah, well, it goes to show that, graduates with a Bachelor of Arts go on and do amazing things. The reason why I wanted to ask you about that Bachelor of Arts and what you took away from that is because of the recent, the recent media attention and government policy around, subsidizing arts and all the rest of it. But it just goes to show, Lex, you're an example of, graduating with that, that full arts degree and what you've taken from that and how you've used that going forward, which we'll only learn more about as we go through this interview. So, Lex, did you always know deep down that you were an entrepreneur at heart?
I think so. And to my mother's disgust at the response when I was told to study more, that don't worry, Mum, I've got this. Yes, I think so. I started selling pine cones for firewood as an 11-year-old. I lived in New Zealand for several years, and I think that delusional and stubbornness, I was a bit of a dreamer, probably still am. Mm-hmm. And I think I had expensive tastes, and at that tender young age of 11, I think I realized that if you want stuff in this world, you got to go out and make it happen. And I chuckled thinking about that, because at 11 and 12 years old in New Zealand, skateboarding around the streets with an old-fashioned ghetto blast, it had D-sized batteries. You don't see them much anymore, but they were expensive. Yeah. So that was where a lot of the motivation came from there. And I think also watching my father's career, a more traditional working for the man style career, and that had its challenges and stresses and travel, and that, I suppose, was a great motivator away from that path. If it's that binary, yeah, that was a huge motivator for me as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had plenty of inspiration and given this a lot of thought, even unknowingly from a very young age. So I forgot to mention to the audience, we do like to keep this interactive. So if you guys have any questions that you want to ask Lex, you can put it in the chat. And we'll also give an opportunity for anyone who's brave enough to come off mute at the end to ask any questions as well. So hopefully that chat box will light up. So let's jump forward a few years, Lex. 1999, you graduate, and then in 2006, you co-found SurfStitch, Australia's first pure play online surf retailer. So my question is, what prompted the move into that online coastal surfwear marketplace? What was the gap that you spotted, and how did you know the time was right?
Well, I think if I go back to just do it better philosophy that I've learned a couple of years earlier, it was, my original plan was to take that experience I built in surf shops. I ended up running a chain on Sydney's northern beaches, and to take on my own physical retail. But during that journey, and I suppose that constant gazing to the horizon, with that dreaming, it was evident that eCommerce was coming for the world, not just for surf retail, for all retail. And again, taking that philosophy of just do it better, if that's the evolution of retail, that's where I wanted to play. And I started out with an eBay store, and it was actually called SurfStitch back in 2005, 2006. And I would be up quite literally till 2 a.m. most nights, packing orders and sending them all across the country, and really validating that was my litmus test, that there was an opportunity there. And again, didn't reinvent the wheel. This was happening around the world. but we were certainly the first to bring that kind of large-scale e-commerce here to Australia. And the education process was huge, and on the bleeding edge of a new field like that, it's that stubbornness and determination was really important. You know, to push through the death threats, the fear of the unknown. It was the Wild West in those early days of e-commerce, and that first mover advantage was a painful path, but a rewarding path.
Yeah, and actually the only path in some ways. You have to be that first mover to be successful. So you and your co-founder, you worked from a home garage, which is very common for a lot of entrepreneurs. Take us back to that time. What was it like for you? You've already told us about that, that bleeding edge and that educational, hill that you had to climb. But tell us about that working alone from a garage, day in, day out.
Yeah, well, you're right. So often these ventures start as a side hustle or a hobby or something of passion. And that's where it started. I was working elsewhere, and that's why I was up till 2 a.m. every night. But it was wild times. It was a full commitment, and I'd find myself waking up in the morning, starting work in my pajamas. Next thing you know, it's midnight and you're still in your pajamas. That's not too uncommon to us now with COVID and working from home, but it definitely took a lot of discipline. It was a whirlwind, and that stubbornness by nature really helped, and anything but success really wasn't an option. So, and it was wildly exciting. It was a new frontier, and you need that discipline that we've all now had to learn working from home. But co-founding, to your question, was a key part of it, and I think it's been a key part of everything I've done since, and where I can help people. It's such a big part of my recommendation. It's a lonely path. These new, particularly bleeding edge and founding your own business is hard work. So that soundboard, that support is so critical. Yeah. So in that journey, my business partner was an investment banker. Completely different animals, great friends, but different skill sets, different animals, and it was so important. He came into the business some years later. I'd taken my pajamas off by that point, and we were quite a lot bigger. But he came from the investment banking world. I was the retailer, and it just works if you divide and conquer on skill sets.
And who brought that tech component to that e-commerce world online?
Well, that was, we had to build everything back then, right? I sound like an old man when I say how lucky kids are now. They can, before the sun goes down today, you can spin up an e-commerce shop and it'll look better than our first website. We literally had to build that with sticky tape, and it was the back end, the front end, all of that kind of stuff. And I think the misconception a lot back then was that it was e-commerce is a tech play, it's a marketing play. It's not, right? It's logistics, and more importantly, it's people. And that was our real, our kryptonite, our real success was around the people that we built, which again is such a key part of that success. We had a family feel and an amazing team. Yeah. Yeah.
It's the combination of that co-founder with different skill sets and being able to work together, combined with the team, that really took you guys from success to success. I've noted that in the early years, now this is not all that you did, but I just took 4 different points. So you guys guided the business to consistent triple-figure growth, reaching $100 million in sales within 4 years. You expanded internationally with the opening of SurfStitch in Europe and the USA. That was in 2012. You raised a whopping 86 million Australian dollars, and you achieved a pre-IPO capital raise in 2014, listing just 3 months later. So, yeah, tell us, what was that like crazy scaling capital raising phase like?
It was a wild roller coaster. Again, like a breakneck roller coaster I mentioned of experiences, highs and lows. The highest of highs, the lowest of health-threatening lows, and I really feel like I've learned 3 lifetimes worth of lessons in in that 10 or so years. How to do it to some extent, and importantly, a lot of it, how not to do it. Right? When you're growing that fast, no one in any business gets it all right. We made a lot of mistakes, but it's how you bounce back and react. Yeah. But that's why I suppose what I'm most grateful for is the lessons learned. And yes, there was financial rewards, but it was the lessons learned, the relationships built, and that experience that I took from that into what I do next. We could talk for hours about those highs and lows, but it was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
It definitely served me well.
Absolutely. There's a question from Clover in the chat. I think it's right to put in at this point. She says, when you create something new or disrupt existing industries, there can be a lot of naysayers. So what challenges did you face because you were trying to do those things differently, and how did you navigate those challenges, Lex?
That's a good question, Clover. I think if you ask my wife, she'll tell you I've got selective hearing. Yeah. So yeah, there were a lot of naysayers, and I generally did get a couple of death threats. When you do instill change, there's a fear of change from a lot of people and adoption, and that stubbornness to push through that, what I used to call the headwind, particularly on that bleeding edge you mentioned, and pushing through. It's amazingly rewarding when you filter out the noise and you execute what you know can be done. And a lot of people said it can't be done, it can't be done. And it's a great motivator to show that it can be done. Anything can be done. Sounds a little cheesy, but if you're stubborn enough and stay focused, it can be done. So good question. And those naysayers, they're always there, and they should be a great motivator for all of you guys.
Yeah.
Because it was easy and it can be done, everyone will be doing it. You got to remind yourself that as well.
Yeah, Clover, did you want to ask anything additional to that? Were you happy with that answer?
No, that's great. Sorry, I'll actually come off for the mute then. Thanks for that, Lex. I guess, did you find that you had to change your strategy or do anything differently in order to get around? I mean, death threats doesn't sound like it's a good thing to have received.
Yeah, I think you got to be careful, Clover, that you listen. You know, I think that's one of the key attributes of an entrepreneur or businessman, or however you want to, is understanding where you need to adapt and where you need to persevere. And I think it's one of the biggest traps, particularly we saw as we became a public company, because you become accountable to thousands and thousands of shareholders that don't really understand the business like you. If you're ever bending to pressures or suggestions, you can find yourself steering in the completely wrong direction. So you can take stubbornness to a point, but you need to match that stubbornness with very sharp listening and consideration.
That's great advice, Lex.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chloe.
So, I guess continuing on with that theme of, you become a public company, you become, accountable to thousands of people that you don't know, and this is your little baby that you've built up from your home garage. I guess it's true to say that more challenges were ahead with SurfStitch, and I don't think you can get around them. It's just one of the things about building a big, successful company. But there was fire on several fronts. Years down the track, there was a resignation of your co-founder. You were dealing with legal proceedings. There was some financial insecurity, and you had to work with a board of management. You did come a long way from that home garage. You must look back and go, wow, what a ride. But I guess what I'm coming to is these are obviously events that you can take really personally, and it can be a huge hit for founders, and the mental health of founders and their resilience and their tenacity and their ability to bounce back from these hits is often will again be part of the success or otherwise of that company. How did you deal with those times, and what's your advice for founders who are constantly being hit with these big blows?
You're right, Ainsley, it's a big one. The burdens are immense, and again, you have to filter them. That persistence and that constant perspective is important. I think that grit and tenacity is not something you can learn. It's something you have to thicken the skin to. But those pressures, we had a lot of, you mentioned mental and even physical health problems, because that knowledge that you are responsible for a lot of people's investment is real. But I think you just have to get away from what I call the goldfish mentality, that short-sightedness, and stay true to the opportunity, and work out what advice you take on and what you push through. So it is an important field, and it is something we learned the hard way, that that burden can be all-consuming. Particularly when you go from the garage you mentioned earlier, where I'm in control of absolutely everything that happens that day, to almost feeling like you're completely out of control. And that happens with public markets and boards of directors and conflicted interests, and a lack of stakeholders with skin in the game. And it is your baby, you mentioned it earlier. So you have to really manage those conflicts. And it's an old saying, but pick your battles is a huge one. Because if you pick everyone, you'll last 5 minutes. And you've got to really work out and weigh up what's worth fighting and what's worth conceding. And it's a constant scale.
I can understand that one, but only in relation to parenthood.
Yeah, it's the same.
I pick my battles and I do it pretty well.
It's the same, but with kids, it's this. You still have their long-term well-being in mind. It's the same principle for business. Pick your battles, play the long game. Yeah. And that was where I think a lot of that conflict that happened with SurfStitch is when it's your baby, you're playing the long game. Yeah. When that goldfish mentality, I'm only looking for a 5-minute return. And that's where conflict starts. And conflict will always be a part of any business, be it small or large. It's just it's managing that and picking your battles.
Yeah. Yeah. SurfStitch obviously is still online, still a great business. What do you like? Do you shop there yourself, or what do you think of it now, looking back?
Well, I've got to be careful what I say. I mean, I left there many years ago, and myself and two of the smartest minds in that business, we started another business to help others tread that minefield. And so where I'm going with that is we still ran their marketing for them, and that business still does. But I think I had so many laps of that roller coaster that I was a little numb to it, and I candidly I haven't been back.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's no bad blood there, and the family that I built, most of them aren't there. There's still a couple, but it really did lose that family feel and that emotional connection. And
yeah, but you've moved on, as you said, and let's move on with you. So you departed SurfStitch in 2017, having made SurfStitch the world's largest and first global e-commerce powerhouse. And as part of our promotion, you gave us a quote and we loved it. And it basically, you believe in the motto, do what you love and it will never feel like work. So you left SurfStitch and then you went on to do something different. Talk a little bit about, that collaboration with those greatest minds of SurfStitch and that company that you created after that.
Yeah, sure. There's a bit of a test I like to hold up to a lot of these ventures, and it's I call it the spring out of bed test. And if you're not springing out of bed to go through all those things I've just mentioned, the challenges, the highs and lows, then you're probably on the wrong trajectory. And I lost that spring out of bed for that project. So those lessons, particularly those lessons hard learned, I felt that I had so many battle scars. It was almost an obligation to help these emerging brands tread that minefield I mentioned. So we set up Periscope Digital. It was a blend of fee for a service and an equity stake. So it was, okay, how about we align motivations, we'll help you take on this path, we'll help you raise capital, strategy, and all these kind of executional e-commerce services. So that business started in 2017. It's going well. But I mean, candidly, I lost that spring out of bed test for it a couple of years ago, where as much as I enjoy working with young entrepreneurs, I felt cars calling me, and that's
well, perhaps the audience might be be questioning that motorcycle in your living room that is not normally in your living room.
Well, it is normally in the living room.
Oh, it is normally in the living room. Oh.
I'll tell you the story about that if you like.
Go for it.
But I suppose it's where that's relevant is through that journey from the early 2000s till today. I keep using this word roller coaster, and that roller coaster shape was not just the emotional, but it was the value of the investment. So share prices, be it through SurfStitch equity, traditional markets, it was a non-stop roller coaster. And through that journey, since a kid, I bought and sold cars. That was my true passion. And if you look at that as an investment class, and then you look at my more traditional investments, cars were rock solid, very predictable, real hard assets. Yet overlaying that with other, it just made sense to me that, well, why is there not an opportunity? And that particular bike I won't bore you on the specs. It's a MotoGP replica. So I bought that many moons ago, knowing that it was scarce. I think it's an artwork, so I could stare at that all day. I don't have many art pieces, but that lives. My very understanding wife allows me to leave that in the lounge room. But that's where the Chrome Temple journey. Maybe if you'll hear me out on that, I'll give you a bit of color about.
Absolutely. And I should correct you, Lex. I think that some people are here for all those specs, and I'm not one of them, but I reckon there's a few online who are keen on all those details. So yeah, tell us about Chrome Temple and where that's taken you over the last couple of years.
Sure. I think James just said he'd like some specs. So
yeah, there you go. James is on.
It's a Ducati Desmo Sedici RR. It's maade in 2008. It is a V4, and it was the only bike in the world ever made as a replica of a GP, a race bike. They only made 1,500 of them. I think 32 came to Australia. And back then, even in 2008, it was 110,000 Australian dollars, which for a motorbike had one or two too many zeros on the price for what you could normally get a motorbike for. Now that bike has depreciated to less than half of what it was, and now it's gotten back to where it originally was, it's a bit of the philosophy of Chrome Temple. Now, the reason it's become desirable is because it's scarce, and I suppose it's everything the future isn't. So I talk a lot in Chrome Temple about not just that stability of investment as a class, but how we're on the cusp of the next automotive revolution, I call it, right? You guys probably, if you go to uni on the bus, it's electric or gas powered. Vehicles are going increasingly hybrid, soon to be electric, and not too far to that horizon I keep talking about is autonomous. These vehicles are going to be driving us. So when I look at where we find ourselves in that life cycle of that revolution, is we're right at the end, the bookmark end of internal combustion, applies for cars and bikes. So our philosophy, I suppose, at Chrome Temple is if we have that view to the horizon, and there's still to be an awakening that a lot of the vehicles on the road today are going to become tomorrow's classics, that truly become art pieces, like parked in lounge rooms, maybe on walls and museums and glass boxes. But so in short, we've gone out and launched Australia's first classic car investment fund, first to have it done here, and arguably for the vehicles we're targeting, the first in the world, which is really that end of the line stuff. There are other funds out there who focus on beginning of the line, early Ferraris, Porsches, Le Mans, pedigreed stuff. We're saying, well, we want to fill a shed, a proverbial and physical shed, with the last of the naturally aspirated V8, V10, V12. That's, no electric motors, ideally manual gearboxes, not too many interfering electronic aids. Truly vehicles that you have to drive, knowing that not far down the track is going to be the complete other way around. Either the vehicles are going to be driving us, or or they're a bit more point and shoot. So we've launched that a few months ago, and if anyone's interested, reach out. I'll show you some of the photos. Like, we have Ferrari F12s, Lamborghini Diablos, Ducatis, supercharged Jaguars, quite a few Ferraris, a manual Gallardo picking up tomorrow. There's lots of those kind of cars that you guys probably aren't old enough, but the posters on walls, you can just imagine that back in the 90s, early 2000s. These are the cars that kids back then had on their wall, and they're increasingly becoming sought after investment vehicles. So that fund's up and running, and I'm having a ball running that. It's a lot of hard work, raising money. As now a fund manager, I've gone from a board short retailer to a portfolio manager. So it's quite the about face. But you know, if I talk about that spring out of bed, this has me springing out of bed on my hands. It's fun, and that if you're not doing that spring, then you're on the wrong track. And that Chrome Temple business is, if you'll persevere my waffle, is many pronged. There's the investment fund, there's a storage and transport business. Literally in an hour or two, we're about to launch our first online auction site, Chrome Temple Motors. So we're auctioning people's vehicles. And again, if you talk about looking to the horizon and understanding where the market's going, it's what COVID's done is really built comfort in people to buy stuff sight unseen. I'm not sure about you guys listening today, but be it groceries, fashion's already been on the radar for a while, but a lot of these purchases are people taking more comfort buying online. Even multi-$100,000 cars now, people, be it boredom, be it dry powder because they're not going around the world for their holidays anymore, that people's comfort with buying cars online has really shifted thanks to COVID. So again, I suppose another example of adapting to how the environment around you moves. It was never really our plan when we kind of penciled the blueprint for this business 1 to 2 years ago, but it's that staying agile to and understanding what your customer wants. I suppose that's another key point in any of this stuff is, you know, I mentioned earlier about having big ears and listening. If you're listening and stay mesmerized with your customer, you'll always do well. These people are so stubborn on their vision and chasing it, if they're not listening, we all need customers. So I think this is a good example of what we've just done here with the auction site. There's been a call for it. We're not going to be the only ones out there doing it, like my fly screen mate, but we're going to be the best. So that's exciting. That's happening this afternoon.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Well, you've certainly generated a bit of interest there on the chat. There's
what happens when you talk cars?
Yeah. Well, sorry, I don't have anything to contribute. I'm a bit of don't know much at all about cars. But Mel wants to know, do you have to put in orders to acquire some of these vehicles?
Well, we have a very broad acquisition network, Mel. So we buy wholesale. We buy some cars, what we call on market. So much to my family's disgust, any downtime is usually spent trawling. So hunting for these opportunities. We got quite a specific set of criteria on what we want to acquire. And that, if you really whittle that down, what we're looking for is everything the future isn't. So there will be some new cars that we buy the last of, but we're trying to buy them where they've already enjoyed depreciation. So we talk a lot about a simple J curve. I'm going to do it backwards for you guys, but vertical is value and horizontal is time. So if a vehicle, let's just use a hypothetical, a vehicle started out life as $100 new, and it depreciates down to somewhere between $40 and $60. We try and target it as it commences its reappreciation. And what triggers that reappreciation is scarcity, so low production numbers, and high provenance, which means it's the quality of the vehicle and its service history. I won't bore you with that. There's quite a few criteria that our only full-time employee focuses on the data, and I'm a little bit more the science, the art and the science. So the science looks at what are the attributes that's going to send that vehicle to start reappreciating, like my daughter's nest egg behind me here. And what I mentioned earlier about that automotive revolution, that kind of awakening that people go, well, hang on, I can't have a V12 Ferrari anymore. I better go and put my foot on one. So if we're buying them at half price, let's call it, knowing that if you buy the right one, it'll get back to where it was full price, as this motorbike does, there will, as that constriction of European emissions really drives and says we can no longer have smelly internal combustion cars that are melting our ozone, that we all want what we can't have, and so demand increases, and then you have a next generation as you guys come in to and come into your own success and wealth. The demand for those vehicles will increase, and the supply remains finite or constricting, and then quite simple economics on where that's going. So often the simpler things are hardest to execute, but it's on track, and we're having a ball doing so. We've got about 16 cars already, and the goal is to have over 100.
Yeah, well, Lex, you have incredible foresight. I've never thought about an automotive revolution, and I hope you're absolutely right. And you're on the right, on the right direction. How big's the team now? Your team?
Well, this is part of the magic. We only have, beyond myself, we only have one full-time employee.
Yep.
In the investment side, and that's focused. She's focused entirely. She's a brilliant ex-JP Morgan banker out of New York, focused on the science. I have an amazing board, none of which I have to pay. They're all investors as well. So we've all invested in these cars. So the team is large, but the overhead is low. A business partner who runs more the operational side, the logistics and everything. So and then a new, I suppose, partner and co-founder in the auction side. That's his skill set and forte.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunity in that space. The automotive culture is huge. I'm afflicted to that love of internal combustion, and no one's really bringing those people together. And there's so many cultural and fiscal opportunities in that space if you can cement yourself as the go-to for everything automotive.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Lex, you mentioned a really important point before, which some people in the chat want to know more about, and that's listening to your customers. Here at the incubator, when startups apply to join our cohort, we require them to go through an education process of basically going right back to defining their problem, not talking about their solution, but defining their problem and embarking upon customer discovery. And there's a question there that says, what's the best way to go about customer discovery? I know that it can be done several ways, but I guess how do you go about connecting to your day-to-day customers in Chrome Temple, for instance?
Yeah, it's such an important point, and it's such a great question. There's no hard and short answer. And I think it's an ongoing listening. I don't think it's listen once, adopt, and there's no better way, I think, to answer your question than to become empathetic with the customer than becoming one yourself. Go through the journey and solving problems that you aren't empathetic with is quite hard, unless you really are very much listening. But again, I don't think it's listen once and then set off on a trajectory. It's that, because that problems and solving problems is a constant evolution. The problem keeps changing. You solve one part of it, and then another opportunity or a risk appears as a consequence. So it's an ongoing listening, and I think that empathy and putting yourself into that user experience is key. Hopefully that answers the question. No, I think that's how I always looked at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The user experience for e-commerce, I was just like, well, how would I want it to do it? How would it help mine? And then taking peer feedback, watching people do it. Don't spoon feed that research. Don't tell them what you're trying to achieve. Take a truly passive, fly on the wall kind of approach and watch them how they tackle it, and watch how they would approach a challenge differently than you would, because we're all different, and our minds tick in different ways.
Absolutely. Jess, you can find out more about that customer discovery process and methods. It's everywhere. There's heaps of Google video, YouTube videos, and all the rest of it. But I think Lex has hit upon a really important point. It doesn't just start and stop. That customer discovery phase continues right through the journey. And yeah, as you say, Lex, the problem continues to change as well. Now, there's another question here from Morgan. So thinking about the future of asset classes, what do you think about the NFT market? Is this a fad or the way of the future? Am I really naive? I don't even know what an NFT is.
Oh, you will.
What is it?
I don't know. A non-fungible, non-tangible, non-NFT. It's a non-fungible token.
Yeah, James has put it in the chat. I've never heard of it. I'm sorry. You'll have to enlighten me.
Well, I'm sure, was it Jason? I'm sure Jason could tell you better than I.
That was James who knew the acronym, but Morgan's asked the question.
Sorry, Morgan. It's, well, he put me on the spot here. I think if I answer Morgan's questions, yes, they're real, they're here to stay. And as much as they can boggle the mind to how they work, I think there's a real opportunity in those. What's the true runway for it? Time will only tell, but I'm still trying to get my head around them.
There you go. Oh, I'll have to look into it after this. All right. We'll take a few more questions from the chat in a minute. But I guess just to wrap up, like that whole, your ride so far between SurfStitch and now Chrome Temple and all the exciting things that you're doing, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
Oh, it's a great question. I think the short answer is working for my daughters. I think I'd love to show them the world and try and get the right balance of being, I suppose, selfish and chasing my own ambitions and time with them and showing them the world. My oldest has strong ambitions to come on and run some of these businesses, and that's I'd love her to do that.
Yeah,
she's far sharper than I am already. She's not even 9. But yeah, I think that, and still doing what I love. And if I'm still playing at Chrome Temple and with cars, that I'd be happy 10, 20 and 30 years if they'll have me.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. And that's lovely. Do you think that you talk about your eldest, but have you noticed, like your mother noticed in you, any entrepreneurial streaks in them?
Yeah, I think so. We have a little farm just north, I told you guys earlier about, and we have a lot of bees on there. So they've already got their own shop out the front. They sell pumpkins, honey, lemons, anything they can scratch up off the land. And it's interesting you say that, because my D-size batteries that I mentioned earlier, that is ice creams to them. So they're supremely motivated to get into commerce. We'll see.
Yeah, well,
we'll see.
That's very exciting. And I love that answer to that 10-year question. I personally hate those questions, but yeah, I think you've got that one right. Working for your daughters is a nice, absolutely a nice job title.
Yeah.
Look, before we move on to some more, startup-y kind of advice, there is another question from Clover about the skills that translate between surf retail and car fund management. She's noting that that's quite a change, although the one thing that is common is that they were both passions for you. So she wants to know, what is the most important skill set for an entrepreneur, since being one might land you in various types of industries and jobs?
Yeah, I think the short answer is relationships and people. And part of that's respect and listening and understanding that all your staff or customers or partners are all completely different. And I think it's the same skill set whether you're selling board shorts, running a fund, or building houses. Whatever it is you go down, I think that's the common thread. And that and I suppose it all does come together: the listening and understanding that empathetic approach. Mm-hmm. and relationships are so key. The quality of and respect in communication, I think, is another really important part of both those skill sets. Consistent communication, respectful communication, and that empathetic approach to listening.
Yeah.
Hope that answers that question.
Oh, that's perfect, I would think.
Okay, good.
Look, a few more questions and then we'll open it up for audience questions. But our incubator here at Macquarie University popped up in 2017. The university decided that it wanted this startup culture on campus, and it brings so much energy and rich ideas and diversity to a university education. So personally, I'm thrilled that Macquarie University has a really functioning incubator that's helped over 80 different startups basically grow and scale their business. And a few of those, many of those have failed along the way too, but will come to failure. But Lex, you were involved, I believe, in some of the initial discussions because you're you're a successful and prominent MQ alumni. Tell us about that.
Yeah, look, I'm a big fan of everything you guys do there. And I think looking back to my experience, that it's almost an unfair advantage. If you can tap a resource like you guys are doing, why trailblaze on your own when you can take that advantage, that collective network? Very rarely will someone not have had to trod your path or stepped on a landmine like I have. So if you have access to this stuff and you're not taking it, it's madness. And I think a key part of it, and it sounds like the common theme keeps coming back to listening, but soundboarding. If you can tap a network, a resource of people to just bounce ideas off, it can be a very lonely path, building your own business. And the more people think you're successful or have access to this stuff, the lonelier it can get. So if you can, mentoring is a huge thing I learned in North America, and hugely successful. Sound a little cheesy at first, but I get it, it works. So I think it's an amazing resource to bounce those ideas around and continually adapt your path, taking those learnings and springboard off all of it.
Yeah, no.
Lonely path on your own.
Absolutely. I'm fortunate to work with these courageous startup founders day in and day out. And when we ask them, what do they value most about the incubator? It's often this peer-to-peer community, the people to congratulate them when they get that massive win, but more importantly, to pick them up and to encourage them to keep going. When they've hit that point of sometimes failure. What's your thoughts on failure? You've probably failed a few times yourself.
You have to. I mean, you guys tell me any successful entrepreneur, any that highly successful that hasn't failed at least once. You just won't find one.
No.
I think it's that bounce back, be it stubbornness or resilience and grit, as I think a term you used earlier, is hugely important. But it's just a real part of life, and there are no fairy tales out there. This stuff is hard.
No, and like you said, failure is just part of the journey, and we at the incubator try to celebrate failure. And working with the student community, this is often such a foreign concept for them to embrace failure, because you just don't want to fail at university. So to bring them into this startup entrepreneurial community and give them those lessons of it's okay to fail and be proud of your failure, or more to the point, fail fast, don't continue, and I guess that is, what do you think of the fail fast?
I think I've never heard that, but I think that makes a lot of sense. Fail fast or adapt even faster before you fail, and then don't let failure be a blanket that you resisted at all changes. But if you must grow and learn from that failure. If it's a failure and you throw your hands up, there's nothing gained there. But if you take it on board and become a sharper tool, then fail more.
Fail more. Yeah, I love it.
If you can see it coming, then constantly adapting. I think any of these businesses that they've changed shape 100 times along their way.
Yeah, that's right.
I've got an idea and I'm gonna, and that's me to the horizon. It doesn't work that way. I think if I may, Ainsley, with the incubator, what's so important is to break away from this horrible Australian tradition of tall poppy syndrome. I didn't really understand how bad it was here, and that's why I think again these incubators are so crucial. Is having spent and lived in the US for a couple of years and seeing how absent and quite the opposite is over there. That's something I think we all got to band together and push through here. That whole, I'm sure everyone's familiar with that.
Yeah.
That philosophy of
the cultures. I have not experienced the startup culture in the US, but I've heard a lot about it, and they are it is quite different to Australia. Would you say, Lex?
Yeah, I was so busy there, I didn't get to see a lot of it, but I definitely saw that absence of, everyone got behind success and failure. Everyone would be happy to pick you up. We're here sometimes people are happy to leave you down. And again, I think that's why it is lonely out there on your own. If you don't have what you guys are nurturing there, that respect and encouragement, that like I mentioned a bit earlier, it's almost an unfair advantage that you're mad if you don't take.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a question from an iPhone would you see failure as a way to adapt and learn? But I think, yes, absolutely. You've answered that. Just keep adapting, keep failing. If failure means adapt,
you learn so much more from that than you do your successes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now there was a question way back at the start, which I've saved to the end because it kind of ties into what I wanted to ask you at the end. If you could tell your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be, Lex?
One piece of advice. Well, I think it would be to continue to surround yourself with people far smarter than you. If you think you're the sharpest tool in the room, you're not, or you're doing it wrong. And that's been, I think if I was good at anything, it was attracting and motivating, inspiring the right people. And they're all far smarter than me. And I think that would probably, if it had to be one piece, that would be
I think you can, that's brilliant. I think you can leave that right there because I think everyone can take something away from that. And it's so true. It is so true. And if you start thinking that you have the answers to all things and that my way is the right way, you're kind of doomed.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there's a few ways to measure smart as well.
Yes.
It's not just academics. I was never the sharpest on paper. It's like that real world smarts, people smarts, and that hunger.
Yeah.
You know, and that's that. I think that kind of gets wrapped up into filling the room with better people than yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Robbie, you get me.
Yeah, no, I got it. And I think everyone does too. All right, we'll move to some of the questions in the chat. Paul, I'm happy to read your question about bootstrapping versus raising investment, but if you'd like to come off mute and save people hearing my voice too many times, that'd be great.
Hey, Lex. I didn't expect you on mute. I'll come off mute. I was just wondering your thoughts on the pros and cons in your head of releasing some equity and getting some investment versus kind of treading the line of slower growth, but bootstrapping it all yourself.
Yeah, it's a seesaw, isn't it, Paul? You know, taking on equity. I mean, a lot of people get mesmerized with liquidity and turning their blood, sweat, and tears into income. But the other side of that is a loss of control, too many cooks in the kitchen. So I think maybe, Paul, to answer the question, that it really depends on how cash hungry. What are the advantages of bringing something on? Is it if it's just to take some money off the table, then it'll always take a second look at that. But if it's to provide the stimulus and that springboard for success, and if there's a first mover advantage at play, all of these kind of things that warrant taking that on, then it is a suggested path to take. It's advised to do it very what's the right word, in a disciplined manner, understanding what are the motivations of your investor, where do they see the business going, are you both looking at the same horizon, or you know, over a couple of beers you think you are, but you find, as was the case with our SurfStitch early relationship with Billabong, we thought we were aligned, but very quickly realized we weren't. And the conflict that can come from that is not just crippling financially, but emotionally, and you can lose all the things that you set out to achieve. So I don't know if that's answered your question, Paul, but it really comes down to the strategic trajectory and what are the motivations for it. If it's for the betterment of the business, then it should be done, and it should be done diligently with the right partner. If it's the betterment for the back pocket, not to say it's wrong in any manner, but just make sure it's done very carefully, because equity is forever. It's a marriage, so you want to make sure you get it right.
Yep, spot on. Thanks for your question, Paul. There's another question here from Annie Thompson, who I believe is the same Annie Thompson. She is an alumni startup founder. Annie, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hey, Annie. Anne?
Hi.
Annie?
Sorry.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Lex.
Hi there.
Thanks for taking my question. We're textile upcyclers, completely new, and started out at the wonderful incubator. So it's so great to see everybody. I'm really curious about what were some of your challenges when you started to scale up. We're facing huge challenges. The market, the landscape around us is moving incredibly quickly. Getting logistical things in place like equipment, you know, the machinery we're having to make ourselves because there's nothing that does it in Australia. So getting money to do that, and then paying rent, and, you know, bringing on the right people, as you say, who are just fantastic people, but they're contracting because we can't afford to bring them on as employees, and we're just at that really tricky point. Did you have any advice around that, Lex?
Yeah, and that's a good question and a long answer, I think. But as you know, growth can be the biggest killer in not just your game, but any game, as it was with ours. And to Paul's question, the temptation to take on capital and dilution to as a band-aid to solving all those problems it can be fraught with both success and challenges. So without knowing too much about yours, I think part of our strategy, if this helps, was to always try and establish yourself for the next phase of growth. So particularly with technology or sometimes infrastructure, machinery in your case, if you're only just solving today's problem, it's only going to be another week or two till you're solving the next one. So, can you almost leapfrog phases of growth and prepare yourself for not the next one, but almost the one after? Can be easier said than done without knowing too much about yours. But that if you're always staring at your feet solving problems, the future comes at you very fast and can be very cash hungry, and you can lose focus on the true opportunity. So like I think you mentioned there as well, finding the right people. It's hard to pay good people what they deserve in the early days in a lot of these businesses. So how do you motivate them in the long term and not be greedy is something I think can go a long way. But yeah, they're cash hungry, aren't they?
Thank you.
So I think that's a good question to come straight after Paul's, because it's that's a tightrope.
Yep. And you're walking it well, Annie. Keep going.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Good luck. Is there anyone else from the audience who'd like to come off mute and ask Lex a question?
Can I ask one?
Yes. Who?
Yeah, my name's Emmanuel. I just wanted to ask Lex. He did the Bachelor of Arts back in the 90s, and I actually did it around the same time. And I've actually just in the last, I finished the teaching degree in 2019. So it's a very different path to what Lex has done. But he did mention earlier in the piece about what he got out of it. And for me, I found that it was giving you an overview of the arts. That was from my perspective, but I want to hear from Lex what he really got out of the arts degree.
Hey, Emmanuel, nice to meet you, and congrats on that.
Thank you.
That latest achievement. I think the short answer there, if I look back, and I have had the chance to do so in meeting you guys, is what I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I didn't really know where to focus my particular learning. So I did human geography and resource management, and I think what I got out of it, to answer your question, and I think with primary and secondary school, you constantly have pressures motivating you to you got to go to school, you got to get this done, you've got to do that test. But it in tertiary and the arts, if you don't light a fire under yourself, and if you're not committed to executing and chasing that goal, it's very easy to get distracted. And I think that was the key skill I think I took away from my time at Macquarie was, and I think it was only years later that it really kind of dawned on me that you have to motivate and strive for executing this, because no one else is going to do it for you. And I think that really translates to everything you do post, Emmanuel, and it sounds like you're on an exciting path there. But as you no doubt know, self-motivation is key.
I would agree with you too, because my parents came from Greece a long time ago, and then being immigrants here. So they came from a very small town in northern Greece, and they had a lot of guts to leave their families behind. So they had their own little fire. So I think in many ways they gave that little fire to me as well to pursue my dreams. I mean, they did as far as they could. They only had a primary school education, but they came here, they started, they had their ups and downs over the years. But what I got out of their experiences was that you just got to keep going. You just got to keep reinventing yourself, and that's looked like what you've done from your studies and through your life. Constantly, that fire, keep that fire going to keep yourself, keep reinventing yourself, keep going, keep trying new things, because I think otherwise you go stale.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Manuel, imagine back then, that wasn't just jumping on a plane. That was probably 2 weeks on a boat. That's commitment.
A month.
Right?
My dad was on a month, but my mother, when she came on a plane, and it was 3 days.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I've been complaining about how cold it is. It was a lot more challenging back then. But yeah,
yes, it was.
Great inspiration for you.
Yes, it is, and they went through a lot. But I said they're still here, they're still kicking, they're still learning. They're still, dealing with the changes. The world is changing, and it's still. But this is something that's been going on for centuries. We have to deal with change, no matter what way we look at it.
Yep.
That's right. You're right. You hit the nail on the head there. If you're not learning, you're going backwards fast, and that's not where you want to be.
That's
Thanks,
it.
Manuel.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emmanuel. Good to meet you.
Thank you very much. You too.
Now, we're a little bit over time, but do we have any last questions before I hand over to Susan from the alumni team, just to say a few parting words? All right. I think it's all silent. So, Lex, I'm going to hand over to Susan now. Susan's the head of the MQ alumni. Susan, how good was that? Great to have Lex, and thank you for that recommendation to get him as part of our Leaders, Innovators and Disruptors series.
Yes, excellent. I'm so glad that you were able to join us, Lex.
Well, thanks for
it's just a shame we couldn't come on campus today for your tour and lunch and really enjoy the sunshine that is out there.
We'll get there.
Yeah, absolutely. But we will look forward to that day. And thanks, Ainsley and the incubator team, for consistently hosting some of our alumni coming back, and also enabling the alumni and the broader community just to come together on this platform. So it is great. And I would have to say, Lex, every time I listen to you, I learn something new. I've now got a new term, the goldfish term, which I think is very appropriate given the environment we're in right now. It's certainly easy to get caught in the goldfish sort of mentality that's out there, and not sort of look beyond that with the bigger vision. So yes, thank you very much for that. And I would encourage anyone else to reach out to the alumni team or come back onto campus at some stage. Obviously things are a little bit difficult at the moment, but the campus itself will be open completely to the public, and definitely to the alumni and future students on the 14th of August, where we'll be having tours and opportunities, specifically an area set aside for our alumni and obviously future students. But yeah, it's great to be able to welcome people like Lex and other successful entrepreneurs, and just tell their story and share that broadly. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Susan. And I guess just to finish off, here at the incubator, we don't just support students, we are here for the external community. So if you're a startup founder working in that garage or thinking about that problem that you want to solve, the incubator is the spot for you. And we'd love you to join our mailing list. And if you're interested in becoming a resident here, I've got several on the line today, which is great to see their faces. And yeah, I encourage you to find out more on our website. But Lex, thank you so much. That was an inspiring conversation. And I think for many, it's probably broken up their day in lockdown and given them a lot of good quality advice and applicable advice to think about. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ainsley. Thanks everyone for listening. I'm glad to hear that there might be some snippets in there that were helpful.
Yeah, there were more than just snippets, Lex. But thank you again. Okay, everyone, stay safe. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll catch you at our next event later in July. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be safe, everyone. Good luck. Go get them.
Bye.
Bye.